what you see on your end, because I don't. I've posted 2 videos in my life, and
Right.
I'm not really don't care about getting paid for it. So it'd be nice to know what you see when you post a video from the other side, like when a block comes in or a strike comes in or a strike notice comes in, or how you understand, how they pay you if you fully monetize it or they share monetization or they take the whole thing. So that'd be cool to hear that first, and then I can, talk about kind of overall what's the system, what did it used to look like, what does it look like now, and what do I think's going on? I like that.
So yeah, I mean, reactors is definitely a thing. I'm sort of with you. I mean, yes, I make money off of YouTube, but it's more of a hobby for me. I have a full-time job. I have enough to pay the bills and support. I'm kind of in a unique situation where I can sort of talk smack, and if my channel goes away, I'll be sad, but um it's not like a huge thing. So the reactor thing is important, but also for me, like, how does it going to affect the music industry, and more importantly, how's it going to affect the bands? So
Yeah.
when we get into the streaming 2.0, I'm going to have a lot of questions because I don't know a lot about that. And coming from a somebody who used to be in a band, right,
Yeah.
and was more of a performance, like live performance band, but we ended when we were recording and was in the industry at that point. That kind of perspective is like, well, I'm a new band, I just got signed, so I'll have questions there
That's fine.
to talk about. So I'm recording now, so whenever you want to get into introductions is cool. Like I said, I'm going to edit this and cut it up as I see fit, and if there's something you want me to leave out, just let me know.
And that is fun. I'm going to go ahead and mention that I was the business manager for Collective Soul. But the one thing is in this video, or even if we end up talking about it, talking about anything that happened directly between me and Collective Soul, I'm going to avoid saying anything about that. Not that I think that it's going to be a problem. I'd rather keep this conversation kind of high level instead of talk about specific instances. Um,
Totally get it. Yep.
so my name is Reed Cody, and I was a business manager for a rock group, the rock group Collective Soul, from about 2000 till 2006 or so. And as a business manager, just really briefly, you hear the term quote unquote manager thrown around a lot in music business, and you may know this better than most who've never been in the music industry. But there are different types of managers for groups, for bands, for artists, for whatever, for songwriters even. Um, You've got what's called your personal manager who kind of guides you to find deals, to find
Right. Right.
find the label, to pitch you to labels, to pitch you to publishing companies, to handle kind of your overall, the artist's band's overall exposure um, out there in the marketplace. The and they generally get paid, I think the standard in the industry is 10% of your gross. Business managers, on the other hand, are separate and apart from the personal manager. A business manager is somebody who deals with just the business aspect. So, whatever deal your personal manager gets you with the label, with the publisher, whatever you decide to do from a touring perspective, if you also go in and you end up becoming a producer and you produce music too, or you produce your own music or other music, the business manager takes what you've developed with your personal manager and manages your day-to-day business. So basically, what I was tasked with doing was just like in a regular business CFO.
Yeah,
So,
gotcha.
I would write the checks to, whoever he owed money to. I would receive the money. I would make deposits. I would create financial statements for him, but I also did a lot of planning for him,
Right.
like for the band, things like, how are you going to invest your money? What are you going to do in the future? What are your future goals and kind of planning that? And also tax stuff,
Right.
filing tax returns and fat tax advising. In that role as a business manager, had, day-to-day experience with, what is this check you just got? What does it relate to? And I had to learn because I knew nothing about this going into it. I had to learn along the way. If a check came in from a label, from the record label, what did that mean? If a check came in from his publishing company, what did that mean? If a check came in from ASCAP or BMI, what did that mean? Or if a check came in from his song being included or their song being included in a movie, what did that
Right.
mean? Because that was a different, somebody different was paying me that. And same thing with touring revenue. So that is basically what my role was. And then in that, I had to kind of learn what is what's the system, what is this whole business model out there called the record business. Hopefully, based on that, I can help answer some questions as it relates to, specifically, your questions to me are going to be probably on the Reactor side, but also from the music business side. Hopefully, I can shed some light on to what does all this stuff mean
Right.
when you get if for some reason you post a video on with including, a music video from an artist on your YouTube channel and you get paid something, what is that payment? What does it relate to? And how does it fit in the overall system? Once we talk about kind of the overall music business, then we can get into more detailed questions that you may have.
I mean, yeah, sounds good. I think between the both of us, we'll have, I think, enough general experience to have an intelligent conversation. So we have the band that I was in had more of the personal manager. So I wasn't the manager, so I don't know the ins and outs of like everything that the manager did for us, but it had to do with calling the label, the production company and stuff. And he was a close friend of us, so he kind of like let me see behind the curtain, so to speak. I know a little bit about that. So yeah, I think between the two of us, we'll be good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm actually a little curious as because I can certainly kind of fill in the gaps with things you didn't see, or once you actually sign with a label and you're able to go out there and actually hire a business manager, or and your I guess your team grows, and because your revenue streams are growing, what fill in the gaps on how that happens as you get bigger and bigger and things like that happen. But I'm a little curious because I really don't deal with YouTube posting videos and stuff. I'd be interested to hear, just a little bit about how kind of that system, how you've seen that system work when it comes to, when you get a block, what is that? Who does the block come from? Who does this, if you get a strike notice, or who does that come from? Or do you even know who it comes from? Or when you post a video, if you're able to share in the monetization, how does that work?
it's a human process that has now basically utilized AI. So I'll upload a video, right? And it takes however long it takes to upload, depending on how long the video is. And then it does this thing where it says checking. So it runs us through this AI algorithm to check for sound matching, video matching, anything like that. And I believe it also searches for like content that they wouldn't want on YouTube, discussions of like terrorism, stuff like that. So it takes keywords and all that stuff. The problem with it is, and I'm going to explain a little bit too why it's broken, but the problem with that is if it finds something, I think it's like a 3 to 10 second threshold, depending on if it's music or a movie. But once it grabs that, it sends it off to the owner of that content, and it's up to the discretion of them only and only them. So for instance, right, you say you post a video, I react to your video, I post it. It's going to say, hey, there's however much time of your video in this. Do you want to allow it or do you want to block it? There's no human intervention in that. So where there's issues with that, and I'll bring it back around to music, but where there's issues with that is there'll be, say I drop a video at 3:00 today, you're doing a live stream and you're watching that video. Because the live stream, they're consistently scanning that live. It actually has ended up before to where my video then gets blocked because it says, oh, there's content from my video, from your live stream that's in my video. So posting it, it sends you the copyright claim, not me, because of just how the algorithm works. So it's not a foolproof thing. And I've heard back and forth from other creators like, oh yeah, I just sent YouTube a thing and they fixed it. I've heard other times where they've sent it to YouTube and they haven't done anything about it. So
Yeah, I've heard stuff crazy all over the map, and
Yeah.
I'm probably going to give a couple examples toward the end after we kind of talk about the system. But you know, like what you're saying about the kind of the integration between live streams, and it's a really important it's a really important issue. It's a huge issue in the music business. Is this issue of live versus Memorex, for lack of a better term?
Right.
Is it live? Or is it a copy? And we'll get into kind of what that kind of means and how that is kind of the first kind of branch, the first fork in the road, really, when it comes to music, as to how you decide what you're dealing with. Because I've been involved in, or been viewing live streams before, and they put some band up a video, and 30 seconds into it the stream gets taken down immediately. I imagine that's an automated system where a certain owner of that copyrighted material has told YouTube, hey, if you find anything live streaming of mine, you take it down immediately. And then maybe some copyright owners, bands or labels or whoever, have told YouTube, nah, it's cool. Don't worry about it. It's only live stream. It's really not that big a deal. And then, if they post it later, or they don't take it down, or they don't mute it on the replay, we'll deal with it on the back end, whatever. Yeah, I've seen a good bit of that. And a lot of that, what's happening, depending on those certain situations, or what they block, or the takedown notices, or there have been situations where I've seen just an outright strike, and we can talk about that a little bit at the end. Given no notice and just boom, strike. We're not even going to talk about it. If you want me to, I'll just go ahead and kind of lay the basics of what kind of the music business is. And then once I talk a little bit about the music business, then we'll get into, because we'll get into how does this relate to music videos?
Right.
And more specifically, how does this relate to how do all these rules, how are they intertwined when you have both music and video? Because both of those mediums developed separately and then kind of merged with the advent of the music video. And the systems are still pretty separate, and they've kind of cobbled together this web of rules, to go by, that's hard to pick apart sometimes when you have both video and audio in the same product, like a music video.
Right.
You've got your copyright and you've got royalties. Now, what a copyright is, before we talk about what a copyright really is, we got to talk about, what does that term mean? A copyright is exactly what it says. It's a right to copy. If you back up a step, and let's not even talk about recorded music right now. Let's just talk about a songwriter. A songwriter, say they're in the studio, they're writing a song, writing the music, writing the lyrics. They jot down, music notation. They write it on a piece of paper, and they write the notes. They write the lyrics under the notes, and then they've got a song. They haven't even recorded it yet. May not even have sung it yet. May not even have played it. They might have just written it down off the top of their head. That artist, that songwriter, that composer has an inherent right to that work product as soon as they write it down. And it's not a right that they have to perfect. In other words, it's not a right that they have to, once they write it down, they got to go to some government office and file a copyright on it. It's really their right, even if they never go to the copyright office and file a formal copyright. Just really briefly, that did not was not always the case. That was not the case, and every country kind of dealt with those rules on written music. And I'm just talking about written music here,
Right.
on a piece of paper, because that's where all this stuff started. Each country had different rules, and it wasn't really that big a deal until, I think, the late 1800s, when people were able to get to other countries more easily. And actually, in the very beginning, where this really originated, this international kind of copyright system, was in England back in the late 1800s. If you had a book, or written piece of material, it could be a song. And in Britain, you had a right to it in Britain. But if you went to France, there were no rules. So you could take somebody's material, go to France, reproduce it, and go back to England and sell it. And you're making the money instead of the person who made the work.
Right.
So back in the late 1800s, these all these countries met in Bern, Switzerland. They came up with what was called the Bern Accords, I think is what it's called, where all the kind of first world companies decided here's how we're going to deal with it on an international basis. And part of that Bern Convention was this concept of, if I'm a songwriter and I write down the song in music notation, then I have a right to it. Nobody else is legally able to take that written material and sell it. I can sell it, and I get the proceeds from it. Then a little bit later on, what developed from that, and we're still talking about, I'm not talking about recorded music still, just that sheet of paper or
Right.
that paper that music's on. What developed from that was a copyright. And because, we got the printing press and all that kind of stuff, we could easily start, printing books and songs on paper. So that's where the copyright came from. So the artist, the song, I mean, in our case, the songwriter, the composer, has a right to that original piece of paper or that original written material. But they also have an inherent right to copy it. So if I'm the songwriter and I have the means and the ability to print that thing in mass and distribute it all around the world, or whoever I want, and sell it and get all the money, I've got the right to that. But that is generally not the practical thing to do. The practical thing, but is developed, that developed over centuries, is for a a publishing house, for a writer or a composer to go to a publishing house and say, I don't want to deal with all this crap. I just want to write my music.
Right.
I've got a right to copy it, but I'm going to give you that right to copy it. And in return, you're going to pay me something. That's in essence what a copyright is. And then that contract between you and the publishing house is what it determines how much you get paid and how much they get to keep. Generally, the publishing house is the one who prints it, distributes it, sends it around the world, collects all the money, and then they pay you what you agreed to in the contract, and they keep the rest for themselves. Same thing has happened in the music business. The thing that's unique about the music business is you actually have two pieces of material. You have, like the written down music, you actually have the songwriter has that right to copy it, just like they do on print. They've got the same right for any kind of dissemination of that work, that song that they wrote. But then as soon as an artist goes into the studio to record it, that creates a second right. And that's the right in the master recording. So you've got the song itself, the written song, or it doesn't have to be written. It could be, you know, just originally however the original songwriter notated it. They could have recorded it on a cassette player. They have that right as the songwriter. The As soon as they make a master recording of that song, then the artists who played on that song they've created another copyright. And that copyright, just like with the other copyright, that copyright, the artists have the right to, make a record, make a CD, make an MP3 or an MP4 and sell it, distribute it, and all that stuff. But again, they usually don't do that. That's when they go to the record label. And the record label works the same as the publishing houses on the print side, in that there's a contract where the artist gives up that right. They sell the copyright to the label, and in return, the label pays them a certain amount. The difference with the master recordings is, ever since about the 60s or 70s, there was a lot of turmoil before that as to what was right to pay the artist. Obviously the labels didn't want to pay him anything. The artist came back later and said, hey, I can't even live. You got me out on the road promoting this stuff, and I get back home, 2 years later, and I still got no money. What developed I think it was the 1970s, especially in the United States, was a mandatory a mandatory statutory rate that both the songwriter was paid and the artists were paid, and if there were multiple artists, those artists would share. And that statutory rate is 9.1 cents per song. I don't know if you remember the days. There was a period of time in the 80s, 90s through the 2000s where every album that came out, every CD was 11 songs.
Yeah.
Why 11 songs? 11 times 9.1 is a dollar.
Yep.
The songwriter would get a dollar. You put 11 songs, and if the songwriter wrote all 11 songs on that album, they'd get a dollar.
Right.
If the artists, were all those, say it was a four-piece band, if all four of them played on the record, on every single track equally, they got to share a dollar. So each one of them got 25 cents per per CD sold. That's a fixed statutory rate that the record companies are probably love, because they're like, okay, if I only got to pay the songwriter a dollar for every CD sold, and I got to pay the artist a dollar, that's $2. If I can sell this thing for $20, I get $18.
Yep.
Or if I'm only able to sell it for $6, I'm only keeping $4. So they have a lot of the record labels have a lot of play when it comes to how much money they make, because they get everything over $2. That is just one set of royalties, and together those royalties are called mechanical royalties. And the reason they're called mechanical royalties is because the song that was written, in order for someone to listen to it, you have to take something physical, or used to. This changed a little in the digital age, but you used to have to take something like an LP, vinyl, tape, or CD and put it in a machine to hear it. Mechanical machine. That's why they call it mechanical. That's the record label. Now, the again, with music, with recorded music, because you have two separate copyrights, the songwriter and the artist have the ability to contract differently. Now, if a song is recorded on an album, on a record label, then the record label is responsible for collecting both of those dollars, both of those $2, but it's responsible for sending a dollar of that to whoever the songwriter was. Now, if the songwriter was the four guys in the band, that's fine. But what if it's all cover song? The record label is responsible for taking that dollar, carving it up, and sending it to all of the different songwriters on that album. And generally, those songwriters are all with publishing companies. So, the label is going to send it to the publishing company. The publishing company is going to send the part of the dollar that they have to send to the songwriter to the songwriter.
They divvy it out, essentially.
Yeah, they divvy it out. But the record label, because they're the ones actually printing the CDs or doing the downloads or MP3s or whatever, they're the ones collecting the money. So they have the responsibility to divvy it up and pay whoever is supposed to get paid. But they get to keep the lion's share of the difference. Those are the two basic copyrights. There's an additional copyright called a performance royalty. Well, it's not a different copyright. It relates to and it historically has related only to the songwriter piece, the songwriter copyright. It's changed a little bit, and I'll get into that in a minute, the past couple years, but it's not completely changed. But a performance royalty is paid to the songwriter whenever a song that songwriter wrote is publicly performed. Publicly performed is a very broad term.
Yeah.
It means anytime it's played on the radio. It means anytime it's performed live on stage, whether by the artist who wrote it or anybody else. Elevator music, that's a public performance. In the doctor's office, that's a public performance. The royalties that are paid to the songwriter for performances, or under as performance royalties, have nothing to do with the record label. Those royalties are tabulated and the money is collected and paid out by the performing rights societies. Your performing rights societies I believe they're nonprofit organizations and they're different in every country, that actually tabulate how much everybody, the people who performed, who gave the public performance, they have to pay into these public performance societies, and then those public performance societies in turn have to pay the songwriters their performance royalties. The way that this works in practice is that on a quarterly basis, these performance rights societies in the U.S., the main ones are BMI and ASCAP. And then CSAC is a new one that I've never dealt with, but CSAC's a little different, but it's basically the same thing. But what they do is on a quarterly basis, they aggregate every public performance of every piece of music in that country. And then they figure out, okay, for each one of those songs, who was the songwriter?
Okay.
And then they have to take the number of times one songwriter's song was played, any song, and divide that by the total amount that every song was played in a quarter. And that percentage of the pool they got goes to that songwriter. So and they pay that out every quarter on a quarterly basis. So that the rate that they pay depends upon how much music is actually played in total. But every artist gets the same amount per time their song is played. But obviously, if some songwriter's song was played 1 million times, they're going to get paid a lot more than somebody whose songs were played 100,000 times, even though they're getting paid the same amount per song that they wrote was played. They've got, in order to make more money, you got to have it played more times in a quarter.
So
That amount per song play is generally somewhere between 2.5 cents to 5.5 cents, depending on the volume of music that's actually played during a quarter.
how strict is that? So like, if some garage band is performing, right, opening up for, I don't know, say The Warning, right, and they cover a Metallica song, is it literally every single performance, or is there like a tiered structure, or is there like leniency at all in that?
It's a little, well, there's two pieces to that. The first piece is it has to be a quote unquote public performance. Now, you playing, you putting on a CD during dinner with your friends is
Right.
technically a public performance, but it's not generating any income.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's no reason, you're not doing it for profit,
Right.
really. I'm going to give you a situation that I just heard about. There was a reactor who's been doing this for like 15 years, doing reactions for 15 years. He was at a club in California and he recorded some new band doing a cover of an Eagles song.
Right. Oh,
Okay. He took that and he posted it. It was like only 80% of the song, but he posted that video to YouTube and it got an instant strike from the Eagles publishing company. That is really not what's supposed to happen with performance royalties. That is really what's supposed to happen with mechanical royalties. Performance royalties are more, there's more of a system in place to say, look, as long as the songwriter gets identified and paid, then it shouldn't be a strike on YouTube. They should still allow it. It shouldn't even really be a block. But it's the performance royalty companies, BMI and ASCAP's responsibility to identify who that person is that posted that video, that made that public performance, and get the money out. They're not really supposed to block. So technically, that guy should be paying a performance royalty to BMI or ASCAP, whoever the songwriter with, Eagles, whoever they're with, and then they should be paying the performance royalty to Don Henley or whoever it is with the Eagles. But that's separate and apart from the record label stuff, the mechanical royalties, which is worth a heck of a lot more money than performance royalties. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff going on YouTube that is suspect. But you got to understand though that what I've been speaking about up to this point is just music.
right.
Other than this video being now, if he had posted the video and there was no video to it and it was just audio, it would be a different story than it would be the story that I just laid out. The fact that video was attached to it potentially makes this a different issue. And the reason is we've talked about mechanical royalties. Right now, we haven't talked about anything visual. It's all audio. Music being written or print or audio.
Right.
So we dealt with the print music, we dealt with the recorded music on a master, and the two royalties that those make. That's the songwriter royalty, and that's the mechanical royalty, and that's the artist royalty on for actually recording the song. And then we've talked about this other kind of tag-along right that the songwriter has called the performance royalties that go to them whenever it's performed, whether it's by that band or another band. And somebody covers that and then puts it out. That songwriter still gets their piece of that, or that performance royalty, and the song and the mechanical royalty for the songwriter. Just to recap, all of those rates, royalty rates, are statutory. They're fixed. 9.1 cents on the record, 9.1 cents for the artist on the record, and 3 to 5 cents for the performance royalties. So they're fixed and statutory. They don't change. There's a big difference when a song ends up attached to something that has video with it. And there actually is a separate kind of, it's a licensing agreement. There's a separate type of licensing of a copyright called a synchronization license. And what a synchronization license is, or a sync license, they call it, when or if somebody wants to include a song in a video production, whether it be a movie, TV show, really anything attached with where their music is played along with video, it's called a synchronization royalty or synchronization license. A synchronization license is not fixed and statutory. It is completely negotiable. So what that means is that anytime somebody comes to a songwriter, this is really just the songwriter in this case, comes to the songwriter and says, I want to use your song in my movie, say that, or TV show or commercial, that songwriter has the ability to say, F you. Yeah, so that's the sync royalty is. And sync royalty basically, if if the if the if the songwriter says, okay, you can use it, they have the ability to negotiate whatever payment they want. They could say, hey, pay me every time. They potentially could say, you need to pay me 9.1 cents or 10 cents every time your movie's ever played. And they
Right.
would have to pay that over time. But generally what they do is they negotiate some kind of upfront payment. So, songwriter says, fine, you can use my money, you can use my song in your movie, and I don't care how many times you play it, just pay me 100 grand and we're done with it. You can, wherever it goes, I give up the right to any other future revenue streams on it, for that upfront payment. But that's the thing is that the big difference when you're talking about video with music attached to it, like with YouTube, as opposed to just music, is that issue of the sync royalties. They're negotiable. It gives the the songwriter in that case a lot of flexibility to not only determine whether or not they even want their song attached to that video or that video product, but it also gives them a huge amount of latitude to determine how much they get paid for it, as opposed to all these other ways that they get paid through their music, which is fixed.
Right.
Um, but again, they have the right to take that right in the sync, the right to that copyright to sync it, to issue a license to somebody to use that in a video product. They also have the right to assign the right to assign that right to somebody else. Now, when music videos first started, they were more of a marketing or promotional thing. It wasn't a money making thing. So generally, when bands in the early 80s or so, when they started making music videos and MTV came out, the way the artist looked at it was from a promotional perspective, not a money-making perspective. What the labels did was say, hey, we'll just give you more money to make the video. It's a good promotional vehicle. We'll make more money if you got a video as opposed to if you don't have a video. So why don't we just lump that in with the rights that you're giving us on the music, and we'll just own the rights to the music videos too.
Right.
And then we'll negotiate for you how much you get paid if it gets used in the movie, and we'll pay you some amount and we'll keep the rest. They were just basically trying to do the same thing they had done all along, kind of take that negotiation right away from the artist and put it under the label's control. That's kind of how the basics of how this about how the copyright system works for music. and how it works for music embedded in a video product. You've probably heard of the term called a micro sync license.
Yes.
A micro sync license is what YouTube uses. Now, I don't understand this as much as I understand the other stuff, but my understanding, and you tell me if I'm right, wrong, or fill in the gaps here. My understanding is that what YouTube pays to creators is what's called a microsync license. And basically, from what I understand, a microsync license is a license that is paid. It's a sync license, but it's a sync license that is meant to be paid on a video audio combined product that gets a lot of use but may not get a whole lot of use by one creator, as opposed to a regular sync license where you've got one creator who can negotiate one big upfront payment for that use and one thing that's going to be disseminated by somebody else a whole bunch of times.
Yes, the way I understand it, and I think it's changed a few times the way it works, and I think it's also certain bands, it's not consistent, which is a whole thing that we can get into too, is how YouTube isn't consistent with a lot of things. But essentially, the way I've read it and the way I've been explained is, you know, say we're talking about UMG, we can go with UMG. UMG creates a contract, a microsync contract that you're talking about with YouTube, and they say, you know, anybody who uses this, either they're not going to get any money, we're not going to allow them to, or it'll be like, you know, they'll get 3 cents and we're going to get 6 cents, whatever it might be. I'm just throwing out numbers. The numbers don't necessarily matter, and that's the contract they have with YouTube. So whether 100 creators, you know, have this song on there, or one creator, they're all going to get the same amount.
Right.
So it's essentially what you're saying, right? The micro being that it's kind of a broadcast in terms of it's everybody that's encompassed in YouTube, but really YouTube is the creator, quote unquote, that's the contract is with. So we're all essentially subcontractors, if you will, if you want to kind of generalize it. So yeah, that's how I understand it.
Yeah, because here's the thing. The way I like to think about it is, okay, if you look at let's just say the record business, just the audio piece of it for a second. You got to have money come in, and then you have money go out. Right. So the money coming in for a record label is, well, in the traditional days, in the olden days, they would sell a CD, and the record label would get money. So they get, you know, say they get, you know, Sam Goody's, they provide them with some CDs to sell. Sam Goody sells the CD for $14, and they got to send $10 back to the record label. Record label gets $10. So that's the money in. Then that $10 that they've got, they have to carve that up and pay it out and keep the rest. From a microsync license perspective with YouTube, yes, the labels have a contract with YouTube. They don't have, you know, they've got the contract with YouTube. So yes, from what you've discussed is the money that goes out from YouTube to the creators. Where does the money come from that's coming into YouTube to pay you guys? It's coming in from ad revenue.
Yep.
So your agreement with YouTube is that instead of you collecting the ad revenue, they're going to collect the ad revenue and they're going to give you a piece of it. They're kind of acting like they're not so much the content creator in that case. They are basically another record label, except they're doing it for video and they're doing it as a subcontractor for the labels, really.
Right. About the incoming revenue too, right? I've mentioned before, and I've posted a couple of videos where I talk about like how little content creators get, how little amount of money content creators get on YouTube in terms of ad revenue, because most of it's going to YouTube, and then, like we've said before, YouTube disperses that out. In every single part that you've discussed so far, including the YouTube part, it's the distributor or the record company basically taking 90% of that revenue and then dispersing out 10% how they see, right? And as an artist perspective, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, as an artist perspective, not even as a content creator, forget the YouTube stuff. As an artist perspective, in hindsight, right, that seems like highway robbery. But when you're an up and coming band. You signed to this new label, and I'm sure that I was part of that conversation. But they sell it to you like, you know, you're gonna have to put in less work, and the ceiling for how much money you can make is more than you could be able to do it on your own, right? So that's kind of how they sell it to you. That's how they sold it to us. You know, if
Yep.
they might be like, you know, you could make 500,000 a year. You're doing it yourself, but if we do it, we can push you past that. We can push you to $1 million, whatever. And I'm again throwing out numbers, but the amount that they make compared to how much the band gets is astronomical. And in my opinion, right, I think there needs to be. That's why these independent artists like Ren, for instance, are changing the game here, because yes, they're putting a lot of their money that they're making into the videos and the production and all of these things. But I think it's worth it because it's literally something they're doing all on their own. Yes, there's a team behind Ren specifically. There's a lot of people behind him. But if you take pride in your work, if you take pride in you getting all of the artistry and all that stuff out of it, I would hope that you would question like what is the production company doing for you? What are they actually doing? So that's a conversation I've had before on other videos and stuff. Not necessarily prevalent for what we're talking about, but I do want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about it a little bit because I do think the artists kind of get the low end of the stick here, and it's sold to them as like, we can make sure you get, you know, popular or whatever. We can make sure you get money, you make money 3, 4, 5 years down the line, instead of, you know, if you rely on yourself, yeah, you might make a lot of money this year, but what about next year? What about 5 years down the line? So there's a lot about that too, that's part of this, but I want to get into the streaming aspect of it, because streaming has changed how money works, how money is distributed. I don't know if you saw, there was an interview or something with Snoop Dogg, and I don't have the numbers completely right, but it was like he had 2 billion streams or something. And they're like, you must have made a lot of money. And he's like, what do you mean? I made like $24. And he was underselling it. He made more than that. But streaming now, the way money is distributed through streaming is kind of broken, how money gets divvied out.
I would agree with you. And here, and again, I'm a little out of my depth when it comes to streaming, because I really left day to day, you know, really any kind of exposure to the music industry in, you know, like 96, 97. And that, you know, Napster was what, early, you know, 90s or something. Or
99, 99, I think. 99, 2000, I think.
Yeah, 2006. 2006, yeah, was when I kind of left the business. But even at that point, CDs were still the main way that music got out to the public. Streaming wasn't really happening. At that point, it was basically just music downloads, MP3s.
Right.
And it really wasn't a sophisticated system. And honestly, that whole digital delivery system of music caught all the record companies by surprise. It shouldn't have, but Napster killed them. And it's still killing them. And that's what we're going to broach here is, are they getting back into the position to where, are they trying to get back to where they used to be? Which I think is from what I've been reading lately, is kind of what they're grabbing at. What they're grabbing at is, hey, ever since Napster happened, we've been getting a lot less money than we were getting when we were pumping out CDs and tapes and LPs and stuff. And we'll get to that. The issue, the thing about streaming, the one thing I want to say before I talk about streaming in particular, you know, when we were talking about sync licenses, there's still a performance royalty that's paid on those too. Just like it is, you know, if I buy a CD and then or if I play the song on the radio, a performance royalty is due on that. Same thing with a stream. If you listen to a song and it streams and you don't download it, then a performance royalty is also due on that. Same with but that's really should be the only royalty that's paid out on it.
See, the issue I have with the download, and that might not be the actual language that they use for the law for that, but anytime you watch a YouTube video or whatever, you are downloading data, right? Now you're not downloading the official song, you're downloading the data to watch the video of the song, what have you, but you're still downloading it. right? So
Well, and I see where you're going with this. There's a lot of there's a perception out there, and even I had this perception for a long time, is there's a difference, there's a big difference between what you get paid for downloading a song as opposed to streaming a song. And there is, but the reason for that, what's behind all that is on-demand ability to listen to the music at the quality you want to listen it to when you want to listen to it. And that has been true since the 50s.
right,
That is how they built this whole business, this whole industry. That's why back in the 70s, the record companies got their hackles all up about being able to record on cassettes. It's why they got their hackles up in the 90s when burnable CDs came about. They even in the 80s they got upset that you had dual cassette players. You could play cassette on one deck and record it on the other, and you could potentially make thousands of copies and sell them. Because every time you take the record label's ability to disseminate that music in a physical form and now in a digital form, and you take that right away from them and you put it in the hands of someone else who doesn't have a contract with the artist, and you give them the right to give somebody else or sell somebody else the ability to play that music whenever they want to, as opposed to having to catch it on the radio or
right,
whatever. That's what the record company has built their value in. The ability for them to deliver to you a product that you can listen to whenever you want, as opposed to not getting it from them and having to hopefully catch it
right,
on the radio
right,
and not be able to copy it and listen to it again. The differentiation between that and where the record companies feel that they add a whole lot of value, so they should get paid for it, is delivering the product to somebody so they can play it whenever they want. It's on demand versus not on demand. And that is also why historically the rates that are paid to artists on the mechanical side have been a lot higher than on the performance side, because the mechanical royalties are something you buy and own and can play whenever you want, as a consumer. The performance royalty side, that is just happenstance. You hear it on the radio. There's less value to that to most people than having it to be able to play it whenever they want. And that theme has carried through since the 50s until now. And and that's why Napster was such a big deal to the record labels and to the Metallicas of the world, whatever, whoever, because all of a sudden the line between owning a piece of music and being able to play it whenever you want, as opposed to just hearing it by happenstance, changed really overnight. Because what Napster was really doing was taking what the system, the music business, saw as a performance royalty issue and made it a mechanical issue. Because basically what Napster was doing was saying, we're gonna give you this song for free, okay? And you're going to get to download the file on your computer and listen to it whenever you want. The record label said, wait a minute, you're stealing our ability illegally to control how people get their music that they can play whenever they want it. And you're killing our model. And their argument back was, let's push Lars in front of you and say, it's not really the labels that's going to get screwed. It's the artists that are going to get screwed. And so they pushed Metallica out there in front because they said, okay, we'll do it. And yes, it does affect the artist's ability to get paid, but it affects the labels a lot more because they get a larger piece of that pie. Like you say, is it right? Who knows? You're right. The record labels and publishing companies, when they see an artist they think has potential, yes. Do they shaft them in the beginning? Yes. Do they tie them into a long-term contract if they think they've got potential? Sure. Do they use the advance and recoupment system? And we can talk about that if you want to too, because that has an impact. The advance and recoupment mechanisms to be able to control artists and keep them under their thumb and control the amount of money that they get long term. Sure, there's all kinds of examples of that, and yes, they do. But the reason that, at least in my experience and what I've seen, the reason that more artists don't go out there and do what the Beatles did or do what Taylor Swift did is because they don't have the financial means And if they do have the financial means to do what the record labels are doing themselves, they don't have business discipline to be able to do it over a long period of time. The Beatles tried to do it in 67. They got screwed. Well, first of all, McCartney and Lennon got screwed on their publishing at the beginning. They sold their publishing rights to somebody else for all their songs prior to 1966. That was gone for them. They got paid an upfront payment, and every song that they made before 1966 was the songwriting royalties went to whoever they sold it to, and eventually Michael Jackson bought it from out from under Paul McCartney.
Right.
Okay. So they also had the recording, the master recording royalty part of it, that mechanical royalty part of it. That they were under contract in England was Parlophone, and United States was Capitol Records, all under the EMI umbrella. But they said, okay, we lost, we made a stupid choice and we gave away our songwriting royalties forever. How in the world can we make more money? And they said, well, I mean, our record label is making a heck of a lot more money than we are by selling our LPs. Why don't we just start? We got enough money. Why don't we just start our own label and buy our own studio and do it ourselves?
Yeah.
And they did that for 4 years until they broke up. But they didn't have the discipline as a band. They didn't have the business discipline to keep it going. No band has really been able to do that ever. Maybe Taylor Swift may be able to do it. I mean, she got farther than everybody else. She actually went back and said, okay, fine. When I started out, my first however many albums, I don't know Taylor Swift that very much. I don't know how many albums she recorded with whatever label she's on, but she basically sold her rights to the master recordings forever in return for this deal, 9.1 cents per song if I'm the
Right.
songwriter, plus I played on it, whatever. She tried to go back to the label and say, hey, can I buy that back? I got enough money now. And they're like, you don't have enough money. You don't have money. We're not going to sell it to you. So she said, okay, screw you. I'll go re-record them.
Yep.
And I have the master recordings on those re-recordings. And I bet my fans will buy the one that I'm putting out as opposed to the one you're putting out from 5 years ago. So she's gotten further along than anybody else in getting to that point. It's extremely difficult for any artist from based on history to be able to do what the record labels do, what the song publishing companies do for the artist, regardless of how much they're getting paid. Because they basically say, we're going to do all this stuff for you, or we're going to do nothing for you, and take it or leave it.
There's no quote unquote proof of this, but I'm sure too that in that instance, right? You mentioned Taylor Swift. She might be one of the one-offs, but in that instance, I guarantee that there's some type of sabotage from the record labels. And in
Well,
fact,
yeah, I mean, they're going to try to protect their investment. They went into they made a contract with Taylor Swift, and they had financial models probably going out for 20 years and said, okay, what can we pay? What kind of advance can we get Taylor Swift here at the very beginning of her career, and what can we promise her under this contract? And then if we own this stuff for 20 years, if we own, well, no, we own the master recordings now for, forever. How much can we make in 20 years off of that and present value that back today? And that's what we'll pay her. As if she comes back 10 years later and says, hey, I'm going to re-record this stuff because I can do it now. I'm going to sell it myself. All of a sudden, their business model is faulty that they did 20 years ago, and their investors are over 10 years ago. Their investors are going to come back and say, wait a minute, you're supposed to be paying me X amount of dollars over the next 10 years. Now have that more that money is going to go to Taylor Swift. How are you going to pay me back? It's this business struggle that they have when an artist, quote unquote, goes rogue and has the ability to do something like that ends up becoming a problem for the industry. That same sort of example is exactly what Napster did to the record labels. They had these business models going out 10, 20, 30 years, and they had people give them money as equity and say, here, take my money. You're going to pay me back a return in the future based on your model. And your model going out 30 years says you're going to pay me X amount every year. But that model was based on them being able to control people being able to listen to quality music on demand.
right.
When Napster came in, it blew up the model. Honestly, what's happening right now, to me, at least part of this whole UMG thing. They're getting stricter, a lot stricter on blocks and strikes and things like that. It's not so much they want the royalties coming to them from YouTube. Yes, they want that money, but they're getting the money anyway. I mean, most, if you use my favorite band, Bandmaid's video. Well, let's not use Bandmaid. They're a bad example because they're not with one of the big boys. But when you use the Baby Metal, say you do Baby Metal's on Capitol Records now. They've got a publishing company, so they've got a sync royalty, micro sync royalty that they're due. They're going to get 100% of that. They're not going to let you have any of it as the reactor.
And they don't.
It's not that. That is not why they block. It is also not why they strike. They will make a claim. They will take their money that they're contractually due from YouTube, and they may not give you any as the person who showed that video as part of your video. That's not the issue. The issue is their ability to control that music getting out to people to where they can listen to it whenever they want. Just like it was in the 50s, just like it was in the 80s, just like it was 10 years ago. Problem is the record labels, in my opinion, have had a very difficult time adjusting to digital delivery. They knew how to do it if you were getting a physical product and they were going and printing stuff, burning a CD or recording on a cassette or an 8-track or an album. They knew how to do that. They did that for decades and they made a lot of money at it. But as soon as digital came along, they were fish out of water. They didn't know what they were doing, what they were dealing with. But it's been, 20 years since Napster. And I think they are finally getting to the point where they understand the market has moved. We're not going back to LPs. We're not going back to CDs. This whole stuff about, hey, LPs are coming back, vinyl's back. It ain't going to be back anywhere near where it was in the 70s and 80s when that's the only way you get music. It may be 1%, 0.5% of the market now. It may get up to 2%. And it ain't going to be 90% of the market. 90% of the market, lion's share of the market going forward is going to be in digital downloads or digital streaming. Basically the same quality, if not better than what you were getting on a CD anyway. What it looks to me like is this, I provided you with with the streaming 2.0 UMG
Right.
proclamation, whatever the heck it is. This is first time I'd seen it 3 or 4 days ago. But in essence, what it sounds like to me, and in my brief reading of it, is that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to go back to the days when they were able to control how people got music on demand, as opposed to just coming across it in happenstance. The thing about YouTube has been the model that they've been using with YouTube has not been paying them nearly as much as they want to get paid, nor paying them what they were getting in the past when they completely controlled on demand consumer consumption of music. I'll be honest with you, I don't use a streaming service. I don't buy CDs. I don't buy tapes. I don't buy records. All the music that I listen to nowadays, it's not on Spotify, it's on YouTube. I don't pay a dime for it. I
Yep.
don't feel bad about that because it's out there and they're not stopping me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, there's no reason for me to buy music. And the record labels are looking at, the publishing companies are looking at going, there's billions of people out there that have, or millions at least, hundreds of millions that have that same attitude. Why in the world would I spend money? Why would I give money to Spotify? Why would I give money to YouTube other than maybe have a premium service on either board? That's what I pay for my music is my premium YouTube service. That's it. There's a ton of people out there like that, and the record labels are losing money because of that, because it's YouTube has taken what should be happenstance listening to music by the consumer to on-demand listening for the consumer, which is what they used to control. And I think they're upset about it. And I think they've developed models now to where they're trying to bring in, and I don't know if you saw it, but UMG this week did an IPO to go public in the United States. I didn't even know UMG wasn't public in the
I did not either until you sent that to me. Yeah.
Universal Pictures is, but I
Right.
would think. But UMG, the Universal Music Group, evidently is public in the Netherlands or something,
Yep.
where
Yep.
the Netherlands, I think, but they're not a public company here in the US. So what did they do? They came out this week and said, we're going to go public in the US and we're going to raise a bunch of capital and you're finally going to be able to publicly own stock in UMG in the United States of one of our subsidiaries. How did they do that? How did they determine that they could go out to market and garner millions, if not billions of dollars from new investors in their company? How did they add value to that? The way they added value to it, probably, I'm guessing here, this is how it usually works in business, is they came up with something to make more money. And if they can make more money, they can get more money from people to put this steps in place so they can make that money so they can pay them back.
Cyclical. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did they build more value to where they can now say, hey, we think we can go public in the United States and raise a bunch of capital? It looks like to me, at least part of that is this streaming 2.0 thing to where they're trying to get back where they used to be. They're trying to get back to where they control on-demand music instead of it being, freely publicly available. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, it depends on who you are. I don't think that there's another part of that 2.0 where they're saying they want it to make it, for lack of a better term, more artist centric.
Yeah, and I mentioned that. So the artist centric thing, right? And to real quick to before we transition, it sounded like to me what they wanted to do like this tiered sort of thing for streaming where, you instead of paying, I have Spotify Premium, so I do use Spotify, but mostly for playlists. But instead of paying $10 for Spotify Premium, you have access to everything. Now you got to pay like $20 to have that access that you have now. So essentially, you're going to have to pay more for what you have now. And then also there's no longer going to be a free tier. You're going to have the free tier now is basically going to be your $10 tier. So obviously you're going to get more money from that. But yes, they have what they call an artist centric policy. And I'm reading literally from the website that you sent me. Reallocate revenue pools to establish artists over hobbyist musicians with less than 1,000 monthly listeners. So
yeah.
Before we even to get into that statement, which is a big red flag for me, I think UMG envisions moving beyond the one size fits all approach by offering a segmented customer proposition, right? So that's what I said, the kind of tiered different kinds of thing. When they start talking about artist revenue and all this stuff, I really do think it's sort of putting a veil over people's eyes. It's like, oh, we're doing this for the artist. And you mentioned it too, that they did the same thing with Metallica. They say, let's put an artist out there saying that they're stealing money from the artist, when really, and again, I'm sort of exaggerating, but really who was stealing from the artists? It wasn't Napster. It's always been the labels, right? But
yeah,
I digress.
there is a little bit of a difference there is that it's the same amount of money, the same amount of money comes into the pool for the artist and the label and the publishing company to share, and it's between the artist and the label and the publishing company to determine what's fair split. If the artist comes in, now I would agree with you that if artist comes in at the beginning, they probably are going to be able to negotiate a lower share because they haven't proved themselves, but later on they should be able to get a bigger share because they're making more money for everybody overall. That's one issue. The issue, though, that I see in this 2.0, the way that I think it sounds to me like UMG is trying to say that they've added a bunch of new value to their product, is it sounds to me like they're fed up with the subscription services like Spotify, and they took everything off of TikTok, from what I understand. But let's take Spotify, for instance. Spotify, as I understand it, because I'm not on Spotify, is subscription service basically to get access to any song you want to listen to that's on their platform. The record companies hate that. And the reason they hate that is because that pays everybody in a socialist way,
Right.
just like the performing arts societies. It pays them based on what what all the songs get played, not just their songs. Sounds to me like what they're trying to do is, instead of a subscription service to hear whatever you want to hear, you got a subscription service to Baby Metal, and you pay for that. You get a subscription service to Taylor Swift, and you pay for that. Subscription service to, or they group them together. Japanese rock bands. You get, for a certain subscription, you get access to these 10 bands, but that's all you get access to. It sounds to me like that's where they're going.
Yeah.
If they, I don't know if they're going to get there. They may not.
I mean, it's kind of reminiscent to what's been happening or what has happened with TV streaming, right? There was cable, and then it was basically just Netflix, and Netflix was battling cable. Now we have Netflix, we have Peacock, we have HBO Max, all these different ones. So now streaming is almost more expensive than just going the cable route, if you think about it. So
Right. Yeah, I guess to wrap it up, that the end here, what I'll just say is that, just to bring this back to kind of the YouTube thing, the reason everything's getting blocked and struck, I think, on YouTube is because they're trying to limit the ability for people to listen to it there because they want to control getting it to you. They don't want you. They don't want you going on YouTube to listen to it. They want to be at what you. They want you to come to them to listen to it.
and the thing, and great, they want to control it. I understand wanting to control. That's awesome. But I wish that they could understand Ren's vision on this, which is like, you're going to get more notoriety. You're going to get more people to see, there's been a few people that have come to my channel and saw Freeze the Fall, who's starting out, and like, oh, I love this band. And now they're huge fans of it. And that's something that's happened on my channel. But countless other reaction channels, there's been bands where I've never heard of. And I'm like, oh, this band is awesome. And now I'm a huge fan of them. So
yeah.
To completely stifle.
Same thing happened with me. Same thing happened with me with Bandmate. I never found my band if it hadn't been for YouTube.
Yeah, but to stifle a marketing, basically another marketing ploy. To me, it just seems ridiculous, and I think it has a little bit to do with kind of old ways that you're talking, like basically from the '70s that they're stuck in, instead of getting with the times. And I think their way of getting with the times is to just try to make bit of around, what is it? What I'm trying to say, they're trying to take old ways of running things and fit it into this new system, and I don't know how it's going to work. We'll find out. But this is a conversation I think we could do a part 2 for sure, 100%.
Yeah, I definitely think so. This part 1 has been fun. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what people ask in the comments.
Yeah, I had one question. We got a minute left from one of my other YouTube friends, Johnny Foxtrot. Don't know if he is. He said, why not pioneer the market and allow Reactor to split monetization? We kind of talked about that. This would provide incentive to all the reactors to push your artists because they would have that much more of a reason to continue to react to UMG artists. And I have that kind of with Ren's label, which is they send me every week an artist of the week, and here's new songs that come out, and then I can react to them if I choose. So just doing something like that. That's all.
Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, I think some of the smaller Japanese labels have done that too. I think Pony Canyon and Bandmade, Bandmade's label, they do a similar thing. But they're not UMG, they're not Sony. So,
all right. Well, I appreciate you getting on here and talking and giving your massive amounts of wisdom. So I appreciate that. All right, y'all. So that was my conversation with, you all know him as Bandmade Fan ATL. I think it's good to have sort of the perspective of somebody who's been in the industry and from the business side of things, right? Not the band like I was, but sort of the business manager and how all that works. And there was a lot of interesting knowledge that was kind of said in that interview that I think is important to understand how things work, right? Because yeah, we can have these opinions from the artist side or from the reactor side, but how everything works, how there's different kinds of copyright, essentially, all that stuff is important to understand, to kind of get behind, at least understand the thought process behind UMG, right? I understand being afraid of not having control over your commodity. That's essentially what artists are to these labels, is the commodity. As an artist, as a creator, as somebody who is artistic, if you want to call me that, to get away from the arts and just worry about the money, it dehumanizes, it takes away from the impact that music has. My opinion, 100% my opinion. That's how I feel about it. So I love this interview. Please comment down below, have conversations amongst yourself in the comments. I will react to it. Bandmade Fan will react to it. I'm excited to see what you guys think. All right. Appreciate that. Please remember that good vibes are contagious.